Hello everyone, this is In-Game Arts with another box and another offline product game review. This is GearShifters for the PlayStation 4. To jump right into it, the on-disc version is just the base vanilla version of the game, so the on-disc version is 1.0. Now sadly there was an update available. This update size was 250 megabytes big and will take you to version 1.02 since the time I'm making this video. Now this update is substantial. It does add some tweaks and alterations and rebalancing, as well as some mode tweaks and I think an extra mode as well as just a slew of other balances and game content to the experience. So it is a pretty substantial update. But like always, I did play the entire game completely offline with an unregistered account, and I didn't experience any game-breaking bugs or issues throughout my entire experience. I won't claim my experience was flawless, but I didn't experience anything that prevented me from progressing. Now, please keep in mind, this physical copy was distributed by Limited Run Games. Now, they didn't produce it, but they distributed it, and therefore there could be a little bit smaller run amount of copies out there available. It's not completely limited like Limited Run Games, but it might be quite difficult to get a copy down the road if you're interested. Now, GearShifters is a roguelite. This is a terms of style where you die, and then you have to restart all over, and you progress, and then you die and have to restart all over. But this one's a bit more different than your typical style roguelike, and this is why I find it a little bit odd that I don't know if we would call this game a roguelike, because while the game does where you die, you have to restart your run all over, you do progressively unlock more abilities that allow you to progress further. It's not like a random chance thing like, let's say, Binding of Isaac or Enter the Gungeon, where you never know what your experience is going to be in terms of the equipment and items you're going to get. So eventually you will progress because you have unlocked more abilities. As well as that when you keep going through the same route, you will eventually beat the boss, and then you can keep doing that route, eventually complete that route, and you'll never have to do that route again. So you can pretty much ignore the beginning route and just immediately start up ahead. It's a little bit different than your typical roguelike. That's why I'm saying I don't know if it really counts as a roguelike. If it is like the barest minimum of required to be a roguelike in terms of you die, you have to start all over. But if we count that as a roguelike, then I guess Mario, the first one, would count as a roguelike, because if you lose all your extra guys and you don't continue, you go back to the beginning. So again, roguelike, it's like people categorizing Souls-like games for everything's a Souls-like if it's really hard. There is a balance between what is Souls-like and what is roguelike. I know a lot of like roguelike and Souls-like, but if you don't know, the game experience is a lot like Spy Hunter or your typical old-time top-down arcade racing games, where it's over the head pointing down at you. Now, the game has a bit of a story, and they do try to twist and make some interesting reveals in the story, which I thought was pretty interesting with how they were approached it, and as well as the controls and gameplay were pretty solid and smooth, as well as the gameplay and not ultimately too difficult for me. There's only one or two bosses that were really a struggle, and they were a lot more like a bullet hell kind of style game experience, while the rest of the game, not so much. As long as you're in control, and of course you've unlocked more equipment and abilities to the game, you're not going to have too much issues. Oddly enough, as you get further in the game, it seems to get easier. That's was what I found really odd about the game. In terms of when you getting to a boss. Every race you start at the beginning, you can choose between 3 abilities you can choose, and these kind of randomize, and sometimes you can increase your odds of getting a schematic, and a schematic will give you unlock a chance to get a new equipment to things. So at the beginning of the game, you're going to be focusing a lot on trying to gather schematics, and once that's getting done, then you just focus on gathering money so you can buy it, and then when you get that done, you just focus on what allows you to progress. It's pretty straightforward. The only really bugs and issues I found to the thing was not anything like in terms of performance. I do recommend when you first time you play, you might want to change the controls to driver instead of what they've originally, I think it's set to fighter or gunner. The reason why I recommend driver is that most of the abilities will allow you to use it with most of the top buttons, and the fire button would just be X. This allows you a lot more maneuverability, as well as it allows you to keep shooting as you're doing your abilities in terms of turning around, drift shooting, as well as like hitting your E brake to brake. And this will allow you to do a lot more maneuverable, and as well as still keep firing. Why there's a bug in the game is that once you switch it over to the driver style, and you quit the game and come back, some reason the game bugs out and doesn't realize that the E-brake button is no longer circle, but now it's L1, so therefore it doesn't recognize L1 or circle as your E-brake. all you have to do is go back to the options, go to the control settings, switch it back to any other one. You can just switch it and then switch it right back to driver, and it fixes itself. As well as that there is one item in the game that it's like ability, you activate it, and it says it fully restores all your life. But when you use it, it actually only restores 50% of all your life. So I thought that was a little misleading in that. Other than that, those are the really only issues I've experienced throughout my entire thing. And those experiences I just talked about weren't really, they're just noteworthy stuff. They didn't like interfere with my entire experience or made my experience unbearably bad or anything. It's just pointed out in terms of the vanilla version of the game. I think the game is bare bones. I mean, it's not going to blow your mind or anything like that, but you don't see a lot of games like this, and I thought for what they did, it was really enjoyable. The combat was fluid, the progression was nice, as well as the story was at least intriguing for what it was. And as well as the graphically, I think the game style is really cool. I like some of the boss designs and how they approached it and how you had to maneuver and balance it between it. I thought they was done really well. I do think some of the bosses, like I said, some of the bosses start getting really difficult. The difficulty spike up quite significantly on those bosses, but just keep at it, unlocking more abilities and guns and stuff like that, and eventually you will be able to progress through it. As long as you're, I mean, even I was able to get through it, and I'm not very good at bullet hell. Like, bullet hell is lots of projectiles on the screen. My brain can't process all that projectiles coming at you, but as long as you just keep throwing yourself at it, and like I said, luckily you beat a faction area, and then once you beat it enough, you never have to do that faction road ever again. So, like, again, it's not like a roguelike, but it has some elements to it. So this is like the smallest version of a roguelike you could possibly get. I mean, depending on your taste and stuff like that, I don't really ultimately think this game is worth going out of your way to get. But if you can come across a pretty good cheap copy or something like that, and if you're really into these kind of style games, then I think it's worth a check out. I mean, it's not anything that's gonna blow you away, and once you're done, you're done. There's no like special unlockables or anything like that when you beat it. Now there are higher difficulties like permadeath, die once, and the game's completely game over. But there are easier mode, like an arcade mode and stuff like that, but anything noteworthy. The only thing that could have been really cool if maybe the game had multiplayer, like offline share screen multiplayer, that could have been kind of interesting. They had two cars, you guys battling, you could maybe hit each other and do self-damage to yourself and trying to avoid and work together. I think that could have added a little bit of content experience to the game, but as I said, this is just a base vanilla version of the game. It seems like they just immediately rushed out this physical copy and they're still patching and adding more content to the game, so that's very disappointing. Maybe we could hope to more an updated physical version down the road, but right now, this is the only version we have, and the on-disc version at 1.0 is still a enjoyable experience that I had with the game. So, like always, I try to leave links down in the description if you're an instant copy. I don't say it's ultimately worth going out of your way to get, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad game. It's just more that what you're after, and if you come across it, I still recommend it if you can get it at a reasonable price. So, like always, thank you all so much for watching. I just appreciate everyone who watched my videos and enjoy these kinds of content. I know I cover a lot of these obscure, random, niche little games, but I've always liked covering these kinds of games. We always hear about the AAA stuff all the time. It's nice to play these little indie small games, and I always like adding these games. Even if it's just a base vanilla version of the game, I'm always happy to have a physical copy of every one of these little small indie games, because to me, they're just as important, if not more sometimes, than AAA games, because indie games don't have the highest chance of getting a physical copy. So to me, I'm always proud to have one on my shelf. So again, thank you all so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next unboxing video. Bye bye.